Hello and welcome to the road to G20. With only a few months to go until the world leaders meet in Sandton, the B20 has finalised its recommendations for G20 leaders. The B20 comprises some of the top business minds and has been looking at proposals in areas such as finance, electricity, education, employment and technology. These recommendations from business will now be discussed in November, laying the groundwork for a large part of the summit. The road to G20 attended the handing over of the recommendations to International Relations Minister Ronald Lamola in Sandton and caught up with some of the B20 task force leaders. B20 Sherpa Cas Kuvadia gave details on the 5 areas of recommendations, saying much progress has been made.
The strategic themes are based on what's come out of the task force discussions. And we're looking at, I think, some of the critical issues important for Africa as well as for the globe. So industrialization being one. I think Andrew Kirby made the point that despite digitalization, despite the service industry, countries in the last decades have grown through industrialization, have grown to manufacturing. And also without industrialization and reindustrialization to a certain extent, we're not going to actually beneficiate the minerals we have. We're not going to actually value add to the raw materials we have, and we'll continue just exporting raw materials and minerals and then buying back finished goods. So I think that's been very important. Energy, obviously a critical issue. Daniel has just talked about it. And you know, adaptability, financing of energy. If we don't actually get that right, a lot of the other stuff we might get right will actually not work. Then I think food security and agriculture, again, it is absolutely unacceptable that in a continent like Africa, which has arable land, which has large-scale smallholder agriculture sector, and we have all the tools available to actually feed our people, that people are going hungry. So to address that, and we have the capability to actually make a significant dent on the food security problem of the world. So we felt that that's absolutely critical.
Do you think there will be buy-in, though, from G20 nations when it comes to beneficiation? Because obviously it swings in their favor. So you've given some great proposals, but are they going to go, doesn't work for us?
Yeah, so I think that the trick, and this is what we're going to be doing in the next 2 months, in advocating this with G20 nations, what we want to promote is, if we actually industrialize Africa and we beneficiate what they're doing, and through that process also ensure that our youthful population is educated, is skilled, through that process ensure that we have not just saying that everything needs to be produced on the continent, but that there needs to be a good balance between what we can produce and developing our ability to produce and raw materials that we export. That if we get the continent right, this is good for the globe. This is good for the G20 nations. If we don't do that, if we continue to look at the continent as essentially a basket case, as a continent that we just want to exploit for its raw materials, for its minerals and so on, then we essentially creating a situation where nations like the G20 nations will not be able to address a lot of the challenges that they have and a lot of problems that they have. So we want to create a symbiotic relationship between what's good for Africa and what's good for the globe, and sell that sort of proposition to the G20 countries.
Yeah. What sort of other headwinds are you facing? You've mentioned a few, but I did pick up earlier you were talking about a few headwinds, and it's sort of cause for concern.
Well, look, I mean, the world is in a dangerous place, right? So I mean, we hand over to America, which is quite challenging, given what the sort of American administration, current administration, the views they've taken, not just on the G20 itself, and that they've really downgraded their representation on the various G20 work streams, but also the views they've taken on tariffing and protectionism and all of those, and rolling back a lot of the gains that the world has made in inclusivity, in energy. So that's obviously a critical challenge. Some on his panel indicated that the involvement of American businesses has been pretty good. C-suite people sitting on our task forces, co-chairing some of the task forces. Our discussion with the American Chamber of Commerce has been very good. But what we need to do now is to make it as less difficult as possible for businesses in America and the Chamber of Commerce to actually motivate and promote the recommendations we're coming out with.
One of the central themes at the B20 is global finance. The cost of capital and therefore lack of infrastructure on the African continent are two issues of concern by local and international leaders. Africa is often accused of selling its resources without rather producing products for export. Sam Shabalala is the Finance and Infrastructure Task Force chair. He says there needs to be a stepped-up approach for financing and building infrastructure.
Ray, at the highest level, I think the biggest breakthrough is that we've managed to get people from throughout the globe to agree on 3 sets of recommendations that we think, if implemented, will make a significant difference to the world. The impact thereof will be profound, pervasive, and will be long-lasting. And just to be able to get these people to agree on these actionable proposals has been a breakthrough.
Actionable proposals, which in particular? Because it's cost of capital,
yes,
there's the private sector, there's lots of moving parts here.
Okay, so there's 3 broad recommendations, and we could drill down into each one of them. The first one is to identify the fact that the world needs critical infrastructure. Now you might say, well, what do you mean by that? From an African perspective, we need roads, bridges, ports, data centers, so that the movement of people, ideas, and capital is easier. So that's critical infrastructure. You need to unlock that critical infrastructure. So for example, of every 10 projects that people identify, only 1 gets to be financed. Out of 10, only 1 gets to be financed. And so what do you need to unblock that? Series of recommendations, one of which is to say, why don't we enhance project preparation facilities? Give people more money and make it easier for them to apply for money to identify projects that actually work out, rather than spend a lot of time and effort and then fail at the end. So that's the first set of recommendations. The second one says the world needs $3 trillion a year for infrastructure. Africa needs 170 billion, but can only raise 85 billion. There's a missing 85 billion. How do you get that 85 billion? How do you get the private sector, the multilateral development finance institutions, and philanthropy to work in partnership to get this money? What are the sorts of things you need to do? You need to change some of the regulations like Basel, reduce the cost of capital, reduce the amount of capital needed for these projects because they're not as risky as people say they are, and thereby release the capital so that you can do more projects. And then the third and last set of things to do is, once you've got the money from the investors, how do you get it into the economy and into the bank accounts at Standard Bank or any one of our competitors in that value chain for SMEs, pay them on the day on which the money is due rather than 180 days later. You know the story about SMEs waiting forever to get paid. So those are the 3 things that can be done that will make a difference.
But how do you change that whole mindset about paying instead of 180 days? Because that's the big problem. Having a small business, you don't survive. You get the end of month 1 and you're screaming for the cash.
I think it takes, firstly, political will. So it takes governments and business to commit to doing the right thing, firstly. It takes people advocating for the rule of law to both government and to business. Please respect your contracts and please make sure that people get paid on time. Number 3, get rid of rent seeking and unproductive rents in processes so that honest people don't have middlemen and women between them and the project. Lastly, have a set of IT and processes and systems and rules, IT processes and rules that insist that the money must hit one account on a particular day and hit the account of the SME on a particular day through an efficient system rather than long processes with many people in the middle, again, giving rise to unproductive rents.
Yeah.
So make it smooth.
And what sort of cooperation has there been from other B20 partners? Because we know what South Africa wants, we know what Africa wants, but what does Europe want and the United States? Has there been broad cooperation? I mean, there are proposals now on the table. This is great.
So Ray, here's something to be proud of as a South African. We have got 3 themes in the G20 as the president of the G20. It's solidarity, it's sustainability, and it is equity. And those 3 themes have animated the work in the B20 as well as certainly in the infrastructure and finance task force. In choosing the notion of solidarity, we've made sure that not only do we have a high contingent of Americans on our task force, we've got a high contingent of South Africans, a high contingent of Brazilians, people from the United Kingdom, from China, from Russia. Believe it or not, of those 170 people, they come from all parts of the world, and as I say, with a large contingent from the United States. And that large group of people are led by a set of co-chairs. There are 8 of them. They range from Daniel Pinto, the vice chairman of JP Morgan, Ann Richards, the CEO of Fidelity International, Benjamin Hung, the president of Standard Chartered International, and various other people, including Strive Masiwa, Mr. Dio from Meridium, based in France, Paris, Samala Zvaru, the president of the Africa Finance Corporation. The point is, people representing the continent and representing the globe, very, very senior people. Those 2 groupings, through a series of meetings during the first half of the year, have arrived at a document that is 10,000 words long, resulting in those 3 actionable recommendations, which any reasonable person, when reading them, would say, I would like to implement as soon as it's reasonably practical.
The B20 task forces have covered a number of vital areas as the world navigates a difficult global economy. Members of the different task forces have set out solid recommendations for leaders of the G20 and their delegations. Follow us on our social media channels as we move closer to the G20 summit in November. There was general consensus at the B20 handing over ceremony in Sandton that real progress can be made by world leaders in November. Until next time.